But now we're turning our attention to a very key sector of the economy, well, the major driver of the economy, if you'd like, the financial services. But we're talking particularly about the banks. We're reviewing the state of the banks for the last couple of months now, and taking a look at some of the issues that they've had to contend with. I'm being joined on the program by the acting head of research at AfriInvest West Africa, Robert Omotunde. Robert, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you, Harriet, for having me.
So, it's a gloomy morning, yes, I know, and it's a gloomy mood for most financial investors as well. But for the banking sector, just give us a summary of the state of the banking industry in Nigeria this year.
Well, it's not been particularly rosy for the banks. And this is stemming from the fact that, of course, the economy is challenged. You earlier mentioned the fact that the banking sector is a gateway to the economy and is perhaps the most important sector within the economy because it's the sector that plays that role of intermediation. The issues that have confronted this sector can basically be summarized in one, and that's stemming from the macroeconomic issues relating to foreign exchange. And if you would look at it, most of these issues that have confronted the sector majorly as it relates to the fundamentals of these banks in terms of their earnings. By earnings, I mean, if you look at the books of the banks, from our own analysis, in 2015, the industry non-performing loan is about 4.9%. You know, that has implication on the earnings of the banks. You know, basically what the banks do is to take depositors' money plus their own capital, create some risk assets, you know, deploy into some investment securities, and at the end of the day, they earn some income from it. But the major issue we are facing now, apart from the issues with foreign exchange, can be basically traced to some of the events that have happened in the sector. In 2013, remember, we had the sale of some power assets by the Nigerian government. You know, these assets were Naira generating assets, but they were sold in USD. So if you look at the state of the banks today, most of the non-performing loans are coming from the power sector. You know, so some of these loans that have been created in foreign currency are giving issues. You talk about the oil and gas, which is also a major sector that is contributing to the non-performing loans in Nigeria because of the fall in global oil prices and, of course, the production disruptions that we have in Nigeria. You know, all of these are affecting the sector. So, but generally speaking, the sector has been resilient, so to speak, but the resilience has sort of been put to test so far since the beginning of 2015. And that's why we see some of the shocks that the sector is experiencing. And of course, the regulator is also coming hard on a lot of players in the sector. So it's like you said, it's gloomy.
Okay, so let's still go back on one of the issues that you raised. The fact that most of these banks had very high non-performing loans. And it was because of credit exposure to very high-risk sectors like the oil and gas. You talked about power and manufacturing firms as well. So even though we know that that's the state, these are critical sectors of the economy that grow the economy. So do you think that there's going to still be lending again to this sector? And if there's going to be any form of lending, how much do you think they'll be getting? Well,
the banks are being cautious at the moment, and that is what we would expect. For instance, if you check their loan book, on the average, the industry loan book actually contracted in 2015 by an average of about 1.6%. That's against the 26.5% or thereabout growth that was recorded in 2014. And the reasons are quite clear. You know, when you have non-performing loans, you don't want to go about, because, you know, these banks also have their risk management processes, you know. So we've classified sectors that are highly risky. I mean, but to the extent that you have a number, some of these banks have as high as over 20% non-performing loan, you know. So most of the banks will be cautious. So we are not likely going to see expansion in loan book. Perhaps what we will see is translation from foreign currency devaluation, because, you know, most of these banks have their loans denominated in foreign currency. Of course, we've seen that by H1 2016 results that were released by most of the banks. We saw that some of them had nominal expansion. There were no real expansion in loan book, because on the average, the industry has about 40% exposure to foreign currency assets. So if you look at that on the whole, we would not expect most of these banks to create further risk asset in 2016.
But what do you think the risk-return ratio and profitability of banks in Nigeria is?
Well, for now, that profitability level has been impacted. The average ROE for the industry is about 9.1%. That's as at 2015 full year, aggregating for all of the banks on both tiers. But if you consider what it was in 2015, in 2014 we had industry average of about 15.5%. No doubt, because we've had a lot of impairment charges that have been booked by most of these banks, plus cocktail of other headwinds, that has, kind of affected the fundamentals of their performance. We've seen that profitability level has dropped, and this is impacting on return on equity.
I know that, very recently, AfriInvest did a survey of the banking sector.
Sure.
Even though that report will be released much later. Yep. I know, just a sneak preview. What did that survey reveal? Well,
what we were basically interested in was to look at how customers are finding. By the way, that's the fourth time we'll be conducting that survey. We started it in 2013, and the result has been quite revealing. We wanted to just find out how customers perceive the banks in terms of customer service, in terms of the availability to loan facilities, in terms of foreign currency transactions. The country has been having a lot of issues in terms of our foreign currency, and what we got, even though I cannot officially declare the results now, is quite revealing that, of course, most of the customers think that maybe most of the banks are not doing quite well in terms of availing loans. For instance, if you are going to tie it to the issue of creating risk assets within the economy, most of the banks feel that the process is just tedious. And but you can't blame the banks, because you have to be sure, because these are not your funds directly; these are depositors' funds, and we link it to the non-performing loans that we said we talk about for the industry. So most of the banks, a lot of the banks, really want to be careful so that you're not creating toxic assets that are going to create problem and affect the profitability of the banks.